Welcome back to Keeping Shit Real. I am your host, Mrs. Jessie Towns. And welcome to my lovely podcast. And today I am going to be talking all about other people's opinions. And I think it's really, really important to talk about other people's opinions when you've got neurodivergent children, because let's be honest, everyone's got an opinion, haven't they, about how you should parent your child. And I have to say, this is probably one of the things that I would say probably gets on my tits the most. And it can be something as small as somebody saying, well, why can't your child do that? And actually, it gets really, really irritating to the point where I do just want to scream to people to tell them to fuck off. And I'll tell you the reason why. I just think it's so important when you have got a child who's neurodivergent that we all do things very differently and we all parent very differently because everybody's very different and different children have got different level of need and some may be more complex than others. So even for me, as you know, I've got 3 sons. I've got 8-year-old twins. My eldest son, is neurotypical, and I've got 8-year-old twins. One of them, they both actually got ADHD, but my youngest twin has ASD, high functioning, and he also has a PDA profile. Now, just because they both got ADHD doesn't mean that they can be treated the same, and other people's opinions of how they should be treated very, very does change. And people will say, well, if that works really well for one, why doesn't it work well for another? And I'm like, because they're 2 different kids for starters, but also one has got ADHD, one has got ADHD, one has also got ASD and PDA. So they're 2 very, very different aspects of the spectrum, not even though that you can't really ever put them in the same category when they're having both dysregulations. Their dysregulation behaviour looks very different to each other, even though they both have ADHD. They can be sometimes extremely similar. They're obviously twins, but they can also be quite frantic. Jakey, bless him, he's very hyperactive ADHD. He fits that perfect demographic of what you would expect a hyperactive child with ADHD to look like. You know, they're being very jumpy, very hyperactive, will talk to anybody, will be very impulsive. Whereas Max's ADHD, he's very hyper-focused. And he can be very, very, very cautious of people. And I think that's probably where his ASD crosses with his ADHD, but also that underlying PDA profile, which we can see behaviours that sometimes do not reflect ADHD in any way, shape or form. However, sometimes they are very, very well in tune together. But where am I going with this? You're probably thinking, oh, Jessie, shut up. And in case you haven't noticed, is the sound quality better? I'm chatting on my new DJI mini microphone. And the irony was, I thought I'd absolutely smashed this. And I don't read instructions because I'm a fucking woman and I don't need to read instructions. Well, I've just recorded this for 20 minutes to realise that there's a transmitter that has to be plugged into my MacBook. And guess what? Your girl didn't have that plugged in, did she? So guess what's happened? I was talking for 20 minutes with absolutely no sound coming into my MacBook. So absolute waste of 20 minutes, but it's not. I get to re-record it and finish off my lovely recording about other people's opinions. So, other people's opinions. I'm sure as parents to neurodivergent children, we have all been there at some time in our life where somebody has given their view or their opinion of how you parent your child or what autism looks like or what PDA looks like, and it's really, really fucking offended you. I know that I think a part of my journey as a parent to neurodivergent kids is the fact that I do still really struggle, like most people. I actually do really struggle with other people's opinions sometimes. Not their opinions, maybe that's the wrong terminology. I actually still really struggle with, it is opinions of how people maybe, if I've got my friends who've got neurotypical children, how actually sometimes my children can behave around neurotypical children can be at times quite frightening for other children. It can be too much, it can be too loud because, again, they have got a level of need that can be really difficult for people that have neurotypical children to fully understand and get. And I get that before the twins came along, I was probably much more unaware of how that and what that displayed and that behaviour looked like. But there's nothing more soul destroying when somebody says to you, oh my God, like, can your kids like not quieten down a bit? Can your child just not do that? And I just don't think people fully understand how really harmful that can be to you as a parent when you've got neurodivergent kids, because let's be honest, this shit is hard. And I feel like we are judged when we're out and about anyway, especially if kids are sort of banging around and, maybe they're having a dysregulatory moment and you just really want, you want sort of the on-sideness of a complete stranger. I know that years and years ago, before we really kind of knew what the level of need was for the kids, that we were in the supermarket, I think we were in Morrison's, and the kids were having an absolute nightmare of a day. And I totally get it. All children, not play up, but all children have good and bad days. Of course they do, they're kids. But this one lady, I've just felt like she kind of had it in for me. Maybe I was way more sensitive to it because as a parent, I'm really quite aware of outside environments and also how my children can sometimes behave has an impact on other people. And I'm fully aware of that. I'm 45, I'm not fucking stupid. I know that my kids can be too much, but it's not because they choose to, it's because they can't help it. And this lady just had it in for me in Morrison's, and she was just totally looking at me. The kids were kind of running around. They were, going in different directions. And I just needed somebody to say to me, you know what, you're doing a really, really good job. And she just looked at me, deadpan face, looked me up and down, was like, you need to control them kids. They're out of control. And I just remember I just dumped my basket of food shopping, and I just got the kids just after I managed to find them after they were shooting off in different directions. I just fucking walked out the shop. I'd had enough. Some of those days in those moments when you are in despair and you do need not a shoulder to cry on, but you just need a bit of decent humanity and somebody to just say, you know what? God, kids are kids, aren't they? And you're doing a really, really good job. And that's all I needed in that moment. But I never got it. And I thought, oh, you fucking miserable old bitch. But anyway, I've never seen her since, because I would quite like to say to her. And the thing is with me, I've never forgotten what she looks like either. And I would love to see her one day and say, oh, do you remember me from about 5 years ago? You really upset me and I was having a terrible day. But your girl's not that pathetic. But and it is one of those things when you've got children that are neurodivergent, and especially for us with having a PDA profile, he doesn't look autistic, because what does autistic look like? It doesn't look like anything. And people's perception also of what a child who's autistic looks like can range from Rain Man. I mean, come on, the film Rain Man must be nearly 40 years old. My left foot. And it's all type of that stereotypical all that stereotypical judgment that doesn't do parents any favours that have got children that are autistic. They've got any form of ASD, whether or not it's ADHD, if it's any form of ASD, whether or not they've got ADHD, whether or not they've got Asperger's, whether or not maybe they have ARFID. People, how they judge, and this is what's really difficult, is people's judgment of you when you have neurodivergent children, I swear, is way worse than when you are. Maybe it's just because we're more susceptible. I take things to heart. I get that RSD when somebody sort of says something about my child. I feel like, oh my God, I'm like the worst parent, and I start to worry about things. But one of the biggest challenges also is other people's opinions of how they feel that they can offer their judgment or their advice to something that they actually know sweet FA about. And I'm talking about, have you tried a heavy metal detox? Did you give them their vaccines? All these type of opinions are so unhelpful. And yes, my children are vaccinated. And yes, I don't give a shit about heavy metal detoxes, because guess what? Autism is genetic. There are members of my family, members of my husband's family that I am way aware of are probably on the spectrum, and it is genetic, and that is where it's come from. And I laugh about it now, but there's like certain things that my dad does that he's done over the years, and I think, wouldn't surprise me if it came from that. But also from my husband's side of the family, and it's one of those where people just feel that they can have their 2 pence worth, and that it's not going to be offensive. But I find it highly offensive. I don't think I probably found it as offensive maybe a couple of years ago, but now more so, especially with more diagnosis and more awareness of better diagnosis rates, because people are more aware, we are more inclusive. But then there's always somebody that has to get their 2 pence worth in, and they have to say, oh, but have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you put them on a gluten-free diet? Have you tried them on non-dairy? Have you tried them on this? And I just think, fucking hell, we're talking about like special diets. Have you met a child who's autistic? Like their safe foods can sometimes be incredibly small. So why are we then going to jeopardise what we give them to keep them full, to keep them healthy, to keep energy levels high? Why would we even risk that when just for the sake of giving out gluten-free? Now, don't get me wrong. I know that there's major benefits to gluten-free and dairy-free diets. However, it ain't going to fix autism, and it's not going to make them suddenly not be autistic. And it kind of just makes me chuckle. And also, other people's opinions of, well, I wouldn't let my child do that. Well, yeah, you probably wouldn't let your child do that. And quite frankly, I couldn't give 2 shits if you did or if you didn't. Like, your child is your child. And unless you have a neurodivergent child, keep your oar out of my family life. But also, it's one of those, isn't it, where you can't help feel judged. And people's opinions can really make or break a day. I know that I've had play dates before and they've gone horribly wrong, and you end up profusely apologising to the other parent, like, was my kid too much? Were they too loud? Were they too scary? And these are things that when you have neurotypical kids, I don't really think that you ever think about, because why would you? You don't need to think about it. And it's just one of those that I think, if you're listening to this and you don't have neurodivergent kids, please, please, please think about the words that you speak, the things that you say, and how you might make a parent to a neurodivergent child feel, because we have it tough a lot of the time. We have it tough from professionals, we have it tough from family members, we have it tough from our own other children. And what we don't need is a friend or an ally or a complete fucking stranger then saying to us X, Y, and Z. And that's really one of the things that I still struggle with. I mean, I said it before a minute ago, but it is really, really difficult. And it is really hard to not take things to heart. And it's, we've got children, we've got neurodivergent children, and we're living and breathing it day in and day out. And it is really hard. Some days I can cope with it today. I'm absolutely fine. Nothing's going to bother me. And then some days it might be a really terrible night's sleep with the kids, and I am really more susceptible. I get upset easier. It might be that time of the month. I'm also fucking perimenopausal, so that sometimes can make things a lot worse. I'm obviously undiagnosed ADHD, and I really, really suffer from RSD, rejection sensitive disorder. And sometimes I get really, really offended by something that actually on some days I probably wouldn't care about. And also, let's talk about other people's opinions when they are professionals. Now, I kind of get it for people that aren't in a professional capacity, i.e. they're not a doctor, they're not a nurse, they're not a teacher, they're not an education psychologist, they're not a occupational therapist. Now, for those of you that don't know, I run a closed community called the PDA Parent Circle for parents who have children to PDA, whether or not they're diagnosed or they're undiagnosed or it's profiled. And I set up the community because I really, really felt that there was not much support that's peer-to-peer, that's lived in experience apart from online. But I actually wanted something that was way more personal, where people could build good relationships, where you could ask questions without being judged. Because, again, other people's opinions on PDA is insane. Now, this podcast is all about having children that are neurodivergent, and I really wanted to really sort of hone in on this about when you have got a child that displays a PDA profile, is that actually it is extremely difficult to get a diagnosis. You can't really get a diagnosis. It's profiled with an ASD or an ADHD diagnosis, and you'll either get an extreme demand avoidance or you might get a PDA profile. I think at the moment I've only actually heard of 1 or 2 parents that have actually got a pathological demand avoidant diagnosis that's run alongside ADHD and ASD or both. And throughout this time, I have learned through my tribe of parents in the PDA parent circle, from my Instagram account at Mrs. Jessie Towns, that I have learned that there are a lot of wankers out there that don't believe in PDA. Now, as it currently stands, we're October 2025. PDA is not recognised in the DSM-5 manual, which is the diagnostics manual that everything that gets listed in, that's a medical thingy. God, you can tell I'm not a healthcare professional, the medical stuff, but everything gets listed in there. Now, unfortunately, PDA is not in there. I don't know why. I think there can be quite a close overlap with oppositional defiance disorder. So that leaves professionals, that are very, very wary of PDA, and is it a real thing? And there's a lot of controversy about PDA and if it's real and if it's not. And I just want to say, as lived in experience as a parent, PDA is 100% real. But the challenge that my parents get, my tribe of parents in the PDA circle, is the fact that people don't believe that their child has PDA because they have that classic narrow-minded overview of, well, we don't see that behaviour here. So if we don't see that behaviour here, then it doesn't happen at all. And it's almost like you are accused of lying, sort of saying that your child with PDA, it doesn't have PDA. And can I just say, the lived experience that parents have should be the weighted of anything, because why would you go and say to a school, oh my God, you know what, whenever Charlie gets home, it is so terrible. But also, I think in the mainstream education system, you know how I feel about this in the UK, it's rigid, it's out of date, it doesn't fit for purpose, it doesn't fit a lot of neurodivergent kids. Well, it doesn't fit hardly any neurodivergent kids, let alone neurotypical kids. So when a parent is saying to a teacher, oh, we see this terrible behaviour when we're at home, and they just get that their opinion batted back to them of an opinion of somebody who doesn't spend time with their child outside of a classroom of maybe 30 children, it's totally not acceptable. But also I recently had to take my PDA out to the hospital, and he was a little bit dysregulated because he has to wear glasses because he needs to improve the vision on his left eye. Now, all of his documentation, it clearly states that he has ASD and he's got a PDA profile. However, the optometrist, is that the right name for somebody who looks at your eyes? Whatever it is, at the hospital was completely non-neuroaffirming. And I did say to her straight up, he doesn't like coming here, he doesn't like having eye drops in his eyes, and he certainly doesn't want you covering up his eye, making him read off a board. Now, I told her this as soon as we started, and she was like, well, he needs to have it done. And she was like, and if he doesn't have it done, well, what are we supposed to do? And she was very, very dismissive of him, who was sat right there. So obviously a child with PDA gets low self-esteem anyway. And then you've got a alleged healthcare professional. Now, I know that she only deals with eyes. Is that a really derogatory thing to say? Probably not. But, this is like the 4th or 5th time in probably 18 months that he's had to be into the hospital about his eyes. And the first hospital that we go to is like the main hospital, and they are so fabulous. They are so amazing. They're so neuroaffirming. They are so on the ball, and they use diversionary tactics. They're really fun. They have really great things for children. They have like Toy Story things that check their eyes. But this old witch, she just weren't having it. She was like, well, he needs to have it done. And I sort of said, I completely agree with you on that. Don't get me wrong. However, your opinion of what you're telling me of how my child to behave is not going to happen because he is autistic and he has a PDA profile and you are not actually helping this. So this was all going on within about 5 minutes of being in there. So you can imagine at this point, my fucking patience and capacity bucket was starting to ramp up a bit now because I was thinking, you're just making the situation much worse. And they got to a point where Maxie, he actually ran out of the room. And he did try to kick her on the way out because she was saying, you need to sit here, you need to sit there, you need to look at this. And I was saying, look, I'm really sorry, but let me deal with this. And she was like, oh, we haven't got all day. And I thought, you know something, love, you want to be careful here because I am close to, losing my shit myself. And I don't want to be that person that loses it with an NHS staff member because both my parents were nurses and I just don't feel, abuse to NHS staff is not acceptable. But your opinion of how my child should be behaving is actually triggering me and I don't like it. So can you just sort of wind it in? Anyway, he ran off around the whole entire hospital, managed to find him. My PDA very rarely goes into flight mode. So I knew that he was really stressed out and the anxiety was like through the roof. Anyway, we found him again. And I said to him, like, sit on my lap. And she said, well, he can't sit on your lap. And I was like, look, listen, love, why can't he sit on my lap? Surely if the chair moves up and down, I can sit him on my lap and then we can move the chair down so that he's in the required eye level. Anyway, she was just huffing and puffing. And in the end, I said to her, you know what, love, this isn't going to work today. I just don't feel that you are very approachable. You're not helping. And your opinion of how my child should be behaving in this environment is absolutely not acceptable. And I'm sorry, but you know what? Let's have another appointment back at the hospital where they are really good with children that are autistic. And they were really accommodating for us because I just feel that you've actually made it 10 times worse today. And do you know what she said to me? Yeah, well, go on then. Good luck at another hospital. I just thought, you love, like, what planet are you actually on? And this is what I mean. I don't know how much training the NHS has across the board for children that are neurodivergent. But yeah, I get it. He had tried to kick her, but he was only 7. And it's all these opinions of how people make you feel. They just make you feel like shit, don't they? It's wild. But anyway, that is it for today's Keeping Shit Real podcast. And I've got to say, I'm loving my new microphone. I think it's going to totally change the clarity of my recording. So I do feel if you've listened to the previous 4, hopefully this is much and improved and it sounds much better and you can hear me more, you poor sods. But as you know, I run a community of parents that have all got children to PDA. If you ever want to join, the link is in the show notes. You can just stay for 1 month and you can leave. You can cancel at any time. And people are always like, oh, it's a bit of a commitment. Like it is a monthly subscription, but come for 1 month, hammer all the resources and then leave. If you are really struggling with a child who's got PDA, I'm telling you, my tribe of parents are quite possibly the best parents ever. The amount of stuff that we've been through, the group chats, we're always laughing. There's always something that just guarantees can put a smile on your face when you are having a really, really, really bad day. And also for those of you, if you're in the Shelf Felt Book Club, or if you're listening to this the first time, we are starting the book, The Magic, on Saturday, which is the 1st of November. And we are doing a 28-day gratitude journey because I'm going to be honest with you. When you are the parent to a child who's neurodivergent, it is really, really hard to sometimes be grateful for what you've got. Now, the magic is a spin-off from the book, The Secret. If you've not read that, it's all about the law of attraction and how your thoughts become things. And the 28-day gratitude journey of The Magic can be truly, truly life-changing. And I'm not just saying that because I want you to sign up to my Shelf Out Book Club. I want to spread the love and the positivity and just how life-changing the magic can actually be if you do it. As long as you stick to it, do it properly and set a bit of time up every single day, I'm telling you, by the end of the 28 days, something wild would have happened. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. This is episode 5. I mean, I've had 5 amazing weeks and anybody that knows me, I love to talk. So this is probably like the ideal job. And I really hope that if you're listening to this, please subscribe, please download, please rate and review, because it would really, really go a long way. And I'd like to get up the rankings on Apple iPods on all of them, because I do think as parents to children that are neurodivergent, we need to keep shit real, because if we don't, somebody else got to. Anyway, take care. See ya.